Good morning, everybody. We are heading up to South Lyon, Michigan to pick up a motorcycle. Interestingly enough, if I'm not mistaken, this is my first Yamaha motorcycle that I will have ever ridden. And I'm getting this possibility because of Twisted Road. For those of you who are not familiar with Twisted Road, they are a motorcycle... a motorcycle rental company. Oh, the road is closed. Oh no. Twisted Road is a motorcycle rental company. It's essentially Airbnb, but for bikes. You can rent out other people's motorcycles, and you can rent out your own bikes. In fact, this V-Strom 650 that I'm riding right now is rented out. It's listed on Twisted Road, and somebody's renting it out in 2 days. So it was within 24 hours of me putting it up on Twisted Road, I already had a rental confirmed from someone flying in from Switzerland, which is kind of funny because we rented a bike when Alyssa and I went to Switzerland a few months ago. It's kind of coming full circle. The two biggest benefits I see to Twisted Road are, one, getting to have a vehicle, or more specifically a fun vehicle to ride when you travel. For example, it wasn't Twisted Road, but it was a different motorcycle rental company that we used when we flew to Switzerland. We had an extra day. We thought, all right, what are we going to do with this extra day? And we rented out a bike and we rode through the Swiss Alps, and it actually ended up being one of the most amazing experiences we had while we were there. And most of the renters that I've gotten as a host on Twisted Road have been people from out of the area. I think I've had one person who was local who just didn't own a bike at the time and wanted to go out and ride for a weekend while his wife was gone. But other than that, they've all been people from out of town who are in town for a few days and want to do some riding, and I think that's pretty cool. The other big advantage of Twisted Road is being able to rent out other bikes and try other things. Like I said, if you don't have a motorcycle at the time but you are experienced, or maybe like in this case you want to try out a bike that you've always been curious about, this is a perfect opportunity. I can head on up here, pick up this MT-07, which I'm very excited to try. I've heard tons of good things about. And I can ride it for the day, see what I think, and then hopefully for my wallet and the V-Strom's sake here, I don't have to go out and buy one for liking it so much. But either way, I get to try it out. Everything's covered insurance-wise. So I highly recommend checking out Twisted Road if you have any interest in riding a bike, as long as you have your endorsement, some sort of helmet. A lot of hosts have extra helmets for you to use. I think they're a really, really cool company, and they are allowing me to experience my first cross-plane crank Yamaha motorcycle. All right, here it is, the 2019 Yamaha MT-07. I gotta say, there's something about the front headlight of this generation, this age of the bike, that to me doesn't really match the muscularness of the rest of the bike. The rest looks really cool. The front headlight kind of has that Mike Wazowski look going, but everything else very premium looking and feeling, kind of coming off. I like all the black. It looks very stealthy, very good. This one actually has a stock exhaust, something the owner says he intends on remedying, but I'm going to be curious to see how it sounds as is. This bike has about 9,000 miles on it. And of course, the cross-plane crank parallel twin motor in there. So it's supposed to sound better than your standard parallel twin, have a little bit more character, uneven firing order in there. Quick shout out to Helite, the airbag vest that I wear in all my riding. Bright yellow. I like to be seen ever since someone pulled out in front of me on the Grom. This bike, I was able to just switch my little tether over. I think this is going to be a good spot for it. I might need to try to find another place to tether it, but it seems like under there is going to be good. Snap it on, and let's get this thing fired up. Pretty simple gauge cluster. Small windshield on here. In fact, well, I'm going to run up and grab some of my earplugs out of the V-Strom. Pro tip, riding with earplugs will not only protect your hearing over the long term, especially for long rides, but you'll honestly probably find it's more enjoyable. That wind noise gets old after a while. All right, let's fire this up. Oh, you push down on this to start. And there it goes. Very smooth motor. That's one thing that's you kind of get used to riding a V-twin, like on the V-Strom. It's not as smooth as these little parallel twins, which does add to the character a little bit of the V-twin. This tire's getting flat. It's very flat in the middle. I wonder if that's gonna affect the characteristics of the bike as I kind of roll into corners. That might bother me. We'll have to see about. No, actually, I don't think it is. Ooh, it's so light compared to the V-Strom. Ooh, that's a nice feel. Very grunty. Ooh, very quick steering. Light steering, too. I don't think this age of MT-07 had a slipper clutch. Well, I don't know. It's a heavy clutch pull. And interestingly, the clutch lever is unadjustable. That's surprising. I'd probably want to throw some aftermarket clutch on there. I don't think it's a slipper clutch. Now, I'm particularly interested in the MT-07 for multiple reasons. I'm a Yamaha fan through and through. I had Yamaha snowmobiles growing up. I've always been a fan of their brand. And I've heard so many good things about this bike for so many different reasons. Good beginner bike, good intermediate bike, good everything bike. Ooh, okay, we got some power. Oh, it feels so different than the V-Strom. I mean, obviously I'm just kind of speaking with what I'm familiar with. A lot of you are probably thinking, yo, of course it's different. You feel so much more perched on top of the bike rather than sitting in it kind of comfortably. And that's interesting. I don't know how I feel about it yet. Once you're at speed, it doesn't feel quite as flickable. It's sort of settled down. Again, that could be the tire. Why does that say, oh, it pops up and says eco if you're riding presumably economically. I'm sure we won't see too much of that throughout today. When you're riding a naked bike, you're so much more exposed to the wind, obviously, and with the quiet nature of this motor, it actually makes it so you can't really hear what revs you're at. So maybe if I got up higher into the rev range and I was on the throttle, I'd be able to hear it. But here, at least at 55, I'm not really hearing when I need to shift or what revs I'm at. So I could see why the owner is interested in putting an aftermarket exhaust on here. It's cool having so much torque, and I mean, it's such a light bike that it doesn't need all too much to motivate it forward, but you can cruise along in 6th gear like this, and you need to accelerate, it accelerates. After a day with the MT-07, got good things to say about it, that's for sure. For those of you familiar with our channel, you recognize the Daily Motor stomping grounds here. So we're going to take this out on the test loop and then return it to its rightful owner, but not without one nice good little romp that wrapped up the day. This thing is really cool. The more I look at it, I mean, again, I'm just not a huge fan of the headlight, but all of this is so muscular. I had it parked in the driveway a little bit earlier today, and then I walked up to it, especially if you kind of turn that over there.
Look at just the meanness of all this exposed metal. The engine right there. Glorious CP2 motor. I've really enjoyed riding this thing around, and I'm looking forward to sharing it with you right now. Plug in the airbag vest as we get on. The consensus I've come to on the MT-07 is it's a motor strapped to as little as they could get away with while still making it a usable street bike. It's like listening to Beethoven on an iPod Nano with stock headphones. It's one part of it is really, really great, but you are a bit restricted by your other elements. But it's kind of good that way, because then it gets you at a price point and it makes such a fun, happy little bike like this accessible to so many people. But oh my gosh, this, I would really, really hesitate to call this a beginner bike. This feels more difficult to manage than my V-Strom by far. The weight is definitely an element. The way you ride it is an element. The way the throttle responds, the way the engine responds, and how powerful it is. And so responsive. I mean, it's like you could easily yeet yourself in one of various directions on this thing. I never really get that feeling, the snatchiness with my bike. And I know I'm going to be making a lot of comparisons to the V-Strom, but that's just what I've been most familiar with. But even my Ninja 650 that I had before this, or before the V-Strom, it didn't feel as manic and yappy as this thing does. This feels like a much more serious piece of equipment. And I don't believe this has a slipper clutch. I don't even think the new one, the 2022 model, has a slipper clutch. And I'm a bit surprised by that. I think that would calm the snatchiness down a little, make this thing a little bit more manageable. But honestly, compared to a bike like the Triumph Trident 660 that we rode last year, I would rather have it snatchy and very mechanical and raw feeling like this than overly refined the way the Triumph was. The Triumph softened the throttle response in first and second gear, and it made for a non-linear experience that I didn't particularly enjoy. Oh man. The Triumph definitely felt like a more premium product, but at this price point and for this sort of motorcycle, I'm not exactly looking for premium, I'm looking for fun. I mean, why else are we riding these things? If you're someone who really cares about more of a premium type product, you're going to start pushing yourself into an entirely different type of bike to begin with. I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm glad the Triumph Trident exists. I think it's a cool bike, I think it's beautiful. But at this at this feature point and price point and kind of market segment, I think the Yamaha makes a lot more sense. The Triumph, I feel like, would be a bike that you'd end up getting rid of, whereas this one I could see keeping around for a while, because I do not see the need to step up to the MT-09. Do a little brake test. ABS, of course, so you can just slam on them. No traction control, so you definitely have to worry about looping this thing. It'll wheelie right up. There was a time earlier today riding around in the twisties that I got on the throttle on a hill and it pulled up in third gear. I was like, ooh, okay, that's not something I'm used to. And a little bit right there in that first gear pull, I was modulating throttle, but it still, I felt it want to lift. I love the torque that you have all around the rev range. It's strong, and it makes it so you can just be cruising at 6th gear, highway speeds, and lean on it and just go. You don't have to wait for it to build up or be in the right gear or anything. it does feel like more of an extension of my body than a lot of bikes I've ridden. And I think the more comfortable you got with the bike, the more comfortable you'd be with that feeling. Here's what I'm talking about with highway speeds. We're at 70 right now. If I decided I wanted to go faster than 70, 6th gear, it's all right there. It starts whooshing onto you. Oh, it's really satisfying. I wouldn't use it as a highway commuter bike. If you've ridden naked bikes at all, it gets old fighting the wind like this. It's one thing at 70 miles per hour for a little bit, but it's not where you want to be. Also, the seating position is just a little too upright. You find yourself needing to scoop way back, lean forward to fight the wind. But as I was saying, the bike feels like more of an extension of my body. And for those of you who are more familiar with piloting a vehicle, much more like a car or a jet ski or a snowmobile or larger motorcycles, that might be a weird feeling for you to feel like you're so ingrained in the bike. And I know more sport bikes have that feeling as well, and that's what's so cool about them, especially when you're tucked in. It feels like you're just an element of the machine. But some of you might be a little bit more comfortable with feeling like, okay, I am the rider and that is the machine, and we are two separate working as one versus two becoming one, if you will, where this bike feels a little bit more like that. I seriously don't know how people daily drive bikes like this and much, much faster bikes and aren't always spending time in jail, because I just always want that power. It's so good and smooth and nice. I want to lean in, come out of this turn, and even at 3,000 RPM, it wants to pull me hard. Not once today have I been riding this and thought, yeah, this is cool, but I'd like to have the MT-09. I guess the only aspect of wanting the MT-09 would be the features and the sound of that 3-cylinder. I mean, this sounds cool, but it's not very loud, and I'm a big sucker for a 3-cylinder sound. What this bike has actually made me want more is a Tenere 700 or an R7. I think the R7 is going to be fairly similar, but you just won't spend as much time fighting the wind. Suspension components might be a little bit more advanced. But the Tenere 700, now that seems like the perfect bike to me. Getting to ride around Michigan, soak up the bumps, be in a more comfortable seating position, screw around off-road if you want, and have this cool engine. I'd be about it. I really would. I'm sure it doesn't pull quite as hard, especially with the extra weight, but that's a cool motor. It really is. Right there is a perfect example. I wanted to speed up a bit, make sure I can make this light as soon as I saw that person was turning, and no downshifting needed, even in 5th gear. Healthy pull is right at your wrist. That's fun. I started out on a Ninja 650, technically the same class as this bike. It's a 2012, no ABS, which I did not care for, no traction control, anything like that, obviously. And I survived. I never put it down. Here to tell the tale, if you will. And I think that was about the upper threshold of what I would recommend for beginner bikes. This motorcycle is more manic than the Ninja 650. It wants to do bad things, and it's going to make you want to do bad things. And I don't recommend that. I really don't. I don't think this is a great choice for a beginner motorcycle. Ooh, wheelies right there. It should be an intermediate bike. The MT-09 should be a top tier bike, a heavyweight, and I don't know what that makes the MT-10. I've ridden a Super Duke too, and this has a similar character to that Super Duke. The Super Duke's more than twice as powerful, but
It's got rider aids, it's got electronics, it's got preservation abilities built into it. This bike does not. And I know once you got more comfortable, if I got more comfortable with it, I'd be like, oh yeah, it's approachable, I'm sure. Owned it for a year or two, and I could see wanting to step up maybe, but me personally, as a rider, this is more than enough for what I need. It's enough, and in some ways it's too much because it's constantly egging me. It's constantly saying, hey Charlie, let's blast way past the speed limit and keep on going. It's cool. It's really, really cool. And I can see why it's so hyped. I can see why people like it so much. Would I own one? I'd still be tempted to get the XSR 700. I love the way that bike looks. I know I would like the engine now. The newer one should have a little bit more approachable throttle and just a little bit more refinement. But I gotta say, if I rode a Tenere 700, I might be trading in the V-Strom because this thing is nice. So thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much to Twisted Road for hooking us up with this rental and giving us the ability to ride out on this bike and spend the day enjoying it. We're not going to hang out in a parking lot with anybody else. Not exactly in the part of town that I would call friendly. All right, so thank you so much to Twisted Road for hooking us up with this bike, letting us experience Yamaha's cross-plane crank, and just have a wonderful day of riding. If you have your endorsement, if you're a noob or a veteran or anyone in between, I highly recommend checking out Twisted Road. Get a chance to ride a bike that you haven't before like I did here today, or go out and travel somewhere and get to do that. I would love to travel to my buddy's house in Denver, rent a bike, and get to ride those roads out there. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you on the next one. I'm Charlie from Daily Motor, and as always, drive on.